The world was informed in 2005 by an Israeli archaeologist that she had discovered the remnants of King David's palace in Jerusalem. Many viewed the hunt for King Solomon's tomb as a fruitless endeavor, a quest for a myth. However, one committed team has just disproved the skeptics by combining old writings with contemporary technology. The entrance has been breached, and initial views inside verify that the rumors were true. The tomb's story starts in the heyday of a magnificent country, the king of legend, rather than in the dust of an excavation site. The name King Solomon has reverberated throughout history, a personage veiled in legends of great power, astounding wealth, and wisdom, ruling from 970 to 931 BC, when ancient Israel was at its most prosperous. Solomon's renowned father, King David, left him more than simply a kingdom. His destiny was inherited. His reign, which began when he was just 12 years old, was characterized by an intellectual and cultural explosion that made his kingdom a shining example of the ancient world, rather than by military conquests. The well-known tale of the two moms, who each claimed the same child finest, encapsulates his fabled wisdom. Solomon came up with the startling idea to split the infant in two when confronted with this insurmountable problem. The reality was immediately made clear by the horrible response of the real mother, who would sooner give up her son than witness his harm. His remarkable understanding of human nature is demonstrated in this story that has been passed down through the ages. The first temple was constructed here by King Solomon in the 10th century BC. Jerusalem was raised from a small city to a splendid capital under Solomon's rule. The building of the first temple was the crown jewel of his rule, a holy building so magnificent that it was considered an ancient wonder. The temple, which was the center of his reign, was constructed over 7 years, using the best cedar from Lebanon, shining gold, and valuable stones. Solomon's reputation as a wise man spread widely. The most well-known story concerns the arrival of the Queen of Sheba, a strong woman from a far-off region, who brought a large caravan full of jewels, exotic spices, and wealth. She came to challenge his thinking with challenging questions, not to trade. She departed in awe, proclaiming that his knowledge exceeded even the lofty tales she had heard. However, Solomon was more than just a shrewd jurist. He was regarded as a talented poet and writer who wrote more than 1,000 songs and 3,000 proverbs. He is credited with writing the ageless writings of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Solomon, which are full of wisdom on people, love, and life. He had equally keen business instincts. Large-scale copper mining operations that earned his kingdom extraordinary wealth have been revealed by archaeological evidence from the Timna Valley. His fleet of ships traveled to the enigmatic realm of Ur and returned with unprecedented wealth and unique artifacts. Biblical scriptures cannot be disregarded, particularly if there is some sort of truth hidden in them. Then there is the data from archaeology. Solomon's story is complicated, though. Controversy characterized his later years. The unity of the kingdom was strained as a result of his alleged 700 wives and 300 concubines, many of whom were foreigners. His people were severely burdened by the enormous expense of his lavish lifestyle and ambitious construction projects. Solomon's legacy endures because of these obstacles. In addition to being a king, he is also regarded as a person of almost magical might, whose fabled seal was said to be able to control spirits. The tomb had to be located before it could be opened. For ages, explorers had been unable to complete this feat. The location of King Solomon's tomb was one of the biggest mysteries in history for many years, a riddle that baffled scholars, treasure seekers, and adventurers alike. Many thought it was gone forever, just a footnote in a mythical story. Dr. Emily Carter, an archaeologist, however, did not think it was merely a myth. She was the leader of a small but tenacious team that endured years of disappointment and dead ends. Ultimately, a collection of old dusty tax records, rather than a map, provided them with their breakthrough. These scrolls, which describe the king's tribute payments, showed an odd trend. Every year, money poured into a little-known and isolated section of the Jerusalem hills that most archaeologists had written off as unimportant. Dr. Carter's team scanned the area using satellite imaging, guided by this new lead. Unusual geometric patterns that were too flawless to be natural were depicted in the photos, concealed beneath the earth. Their initial excavation effort was unsuccessful. Just below the surface, an exceptionally hard stratum of stone was broken by their contemporary drilling equipment. When the team's geologist, Dr. Hughes, discovered that this wasn't natural limestone, he was frustrated but not defeated. It was a barrier that was designed Ancient architects used this cunning trick to trick tomb invaders and safeguard whatever was underneath. At that moment, Dr. Carter became interested in a local folklore. A shepherd child lost a goat down a little crevice in the ground, according to an old tale. According to the youngster, he saw walls deep within the soil that glistened like stars. This minor element was crucial, because it aligned with historical accounts of Solomon's passion for buildings that featured glistening minerals. A sudden, intense downpour was the catalyst for the team's real breakthrough. When the region was inundated, the crew saw that the water flowed differently around a certain location, exposing a small dip in the earth that had previously been hidden. An amazing image appeared on the screen as they introduced ground-penetrating radar, a huge system of passageways and rooms buried far below. They discovered the entryway after 3 months of meticulous excavation. However, they quickly learned that the tomb's creators had installed a clever security mechanism. The tunnels were a labyrinth of false passageways that were intended to collapse if a person made a mistake. By applying her extensive understanding of ancient Hebrew engineering, Dr. Carter was able to determine the actual route and lead the team through the perilous maze. When their funds ran out, the mission almost stopped. However, the prompt finding of a tiny golden seal with Solomon's insignia was sufficient to persuade their funders that they were about to make a momentous discovery. They knew they were about to provide a solution to a conundrum that has plagued historians for 5 millennia, as they readied themselves to break into the last chamber. One problem was locating the entryway. It was quite another to open a door when ancient cleverness had sealed it. Breaking the ancients' code, the team was confronted by the sealed door of King Solomon's tomb, which resembled a massive, immovable puzzle. Without a latch or lock apparent, the enormous stone door appeared to be impregnable. Brute force was not an option, and Dr. Carter and her staff knew it. A single mistake might cause a collapse and permanently obliterate valuable historical evidence. They needed to adopt the old builders' way of thinking. They started by mapping the entrance mechanism in 3 dimensions using ground-penetrating radar. A stunningly intricate network of concealed counterwells, gears, and locking pins that were all connected within the stone was discovered by the radar. In the dark, it was similar to attempting to solve a Rubik's Cube. Dr. Hughes examined the surface of the door and saw odd, subtle wear patterns. These markings weren't arbitrary. They matched the mathematical puzzles that were mentioned in old Solomonic scriptures. The secret was this. The crew discovered that a key of digits, not a physical key, was used to open the door. The researchers reconstructed the opening sequence using their 3D models in collaboration with specialists in ancient engineering. On the surface of the door, they found 7 different pressure spots, the number of pillars at the temple's entrance, the years it took to build, or some other significant number in Solomon's life is represented by each one. To disengage the internal locks, these locations required to be pressed in a certain order. It took 3 exhausting days to open the door. Working in shifts around the clock, the team used specially made instruments to apply precise pressure to each location. There was a lot of anxiety and excitement in the tunnel. A gentle click would reverberate from inside the stone with each point that was properly engaged, indicating that they had advanced 1 level. They encountered the trickiest piece of the puzzle on the last day. 3 distinct places had to be pressed simultaneously for the last locking mechanism to work. Their timing may set off a fail-safe, a rock fall intended to permanently seal the tomb. If they were even a single second off, despite the tremendous weight of history bearing down on her, Carter herself led this last delicate operation, her hands firm. 3 points were pressed with a coordinated signal. There was silence for a while. Then the air was filled with a low grinding sound. For the first time in 5,000 years, the sound of ancient gears rotating. The enormous stone door started to slide sideways, exposing a pitch-black aperture. The smell of stone, dust, and lost secrets was released in a rush of cool ancient air. At last, King Solomon's tomb was open. The team was ready to venture into a planet that had been unexplored for 5 millennia, after years of seeking and days of arduous labor. There was a tunnel into darkness when the hefty stone door slid fully open. The rays of Dr. Carter's and her team's flashlights pierced the darkness as they crossed the threshold and fell upon a scene that left them all speechless with wonder. King Solomon's tomb's antechamber wasn't a filthy, dusty crypt. It was a stunning treasure chamber that had been kept immaculately clean, as though it had just been shut. Thousands of microscopic gold particles, disturbed for the first time in eons, danced in their light, making the air itself appear to shine. Instead of being plain stone, the walls were painted in vivid murals that portrayed events from Solomon's life. including his well-known judgment, his encounter with the Queen of Sheba, and the building of the magnificent temple. There was a huge golden throne in the middle of the room. The armrests are sculpted to resemble roaring lions. Rich dark fabric was used to make the seat cushion, which was amazingly preserved and still appeared to have the faint imprint of the king who had sat there most recently. Emeralds, sapphires, rubies, and other precious jewels were set into the surface of the throne to create elaborate designs that glinted in the sunlight. According to Dr. Hughes, it was exactly like the biblical depiction of Solomon's throne, down to the 6 steps and 12 lion guards. The chamber was filled with ceremonial items that seemed to be waiting for a ceremony to start. Like sentinels, 7 branching menorahs made of pure gold stood guard. On little tables were incense burners that still held chunks of ancient resin that had hardened. Solomon's own seal ring, with the recognizable 6-pointed star on its surface, was resting on one of these tables. What looked like anointing oils were in fragile glass bottles nearby. Their subtle, pleasant scent was amazingly retained. The team discovered something quite personal in one corner, a little private room that appeared to be a study. Reed pens and dried inkwells were still stored on a wooden writing desk that had been shielded from deterioration by the steady, dry conditions of the tomb. One may easily picture Solomon himself sitting here in solitary reflection, possibly writing some of his well-known sayings. The team was aware that before proceeding, they needed to meticulously document everything. Every relic was a component of a historical puzzle that had the power to alter our understanding of the ancient world. They discovered pieces of Chinese silk, elaborate African ivory carvings, Indian spices preserved in airtight containers, and proof of a huge commercial network. They discovered a sizable, lockable chest, adorned with enigmatic markings that were unlike anything they had ever seen. They couldn't have imagined the wealth and knowledge in the first chamber alone. However, the passageways that led deeper into the tomb, and this enigmatic chest promised even more amazing discoveries to come. Although Solomon's wealth had been the subject of ages' worth of mythology, the truth was more breathtaking than any tale. The wealth of Solomon is unimaginable. The enormity of the wealth inside the tomb complex became nearly overwhelming as the team ventured further. King Solomon's wealth was more than just a myth. It would be a huge understatement. These vaults held treasures that made the most renowned collections in the world appear like a kid's piggy bank. There was gold everywhere. The walls were lined with solid gold furniture, statues, and ceremonial items in addition to coinage. A group of holy items thought to have been used in the original temple served as the focal point of the major treasury. Plates, cups, and basins were all solid gold. It was amazing how pure the gold was. Subsequent examination showed that it was more advanced than current refinement methods could handle. There were boxes filled to overflowing with valuable stones in one chamber. There were diamonds so big and clear that they caught and refracted the light in brilliant displays. Deep crimson rubies that seemed to burn from inside, and emeralds the size of a man's hand. On little tables were incense burners that still held chunks of ancient resin that had hardened. Solomon's own seal ring, with the recognizable 6-pointed star on its surface, was resting on one of these tables. What looked like anointing oils were in fragile glass bottles nearby. Their subtle, pleasant scent was amazingly retained. The team discovered something quite personal in one corner, a little private room that appeared to be a study. Reed pens and dried inkwells were still stored on a wooden writing desk that had been shielded from deterioration by the steady, dry conditions of the tomb. One may easily picture Solomon himself sitting here in solitary reflection, possibly writing some of his well-known sayings. The team was aware that before proceeding, they needed to meticulously document everything. Every relic was a component of a historical puzzle that had the power to alter our understanding of the ancient world. They discovered pieces of Chinese silk, elaborate African ivory carvings, Indian spices preserved in airtight containers, and proof of a huge commercial network. They discovered a sizable, lockable chest, adorned with enigmatic markings that were unlike anything they had ever seen. They couldn't have imagined the wealth and knowledge in the first chamber alone. However, the passageways that led deeper into the tomb, and this enigmatic chest promised even more amazing discoveries to come. Although Solomon's wealth had been the subject of ages' worth of mythology, the truth was more breathtaking than any tale. The wealth of Solomon is unimaginable. The enormity of the wealth inside the tomb complex became nearly overwhelming as the team ventured further. King Solomon's wealth was more than just a myth. It would be a huge understatement. These vaults held treasures that made the most renowned collections in the world appear like a kid's piggy bank. There was gold everywhere. The walls were lined with solid gold furniture, statues, and ceremonial items in addition to coinage. A group of holy items thought to have been used in the original temple served as the focal point of the major treasury. Plates, cups, and basins were all solid gold. It was amazing how pure the gold was. Subsequent examination showed that it was more advanced than current refinement methods could handle. There were boxes filled to overflowing with valuable stones in one chamber. There were diamonds so big and clear that they caught and refracted the light in brilliant displays. Deep crimson rubies that seemed to burn from inside, and emeralds the size of a man's hand. With no contemporary parallel to compare it to, scientists are still examining its chemical makeup. Among the most intriguing findings were a number of tablets that were coded. The team's chief linguist, Dr. Hughes, worked for weeks to decode the encrypted messages. They unveiled sophisticated mathematical ideas and building designs rather than folktales or sayings. The engineering processes used to construct the first temple were detailed in the inscriptions. These methods included mining and lifting large stones, which may help to explain how ancient architects were able to attain such precision without the aid of modern machines. The crew discovered diplomatic letters with nations such as Egypt and Phoenicia, concealed in a hidden chamber in the wall. The political alliances of the biblical period are illuminated in unexpected ways by these letters written on small sheets of metal. Additionally, they discovered ceremonial robes that were so beautifully maintained that they appeared to be appropriate for modern wear. These robes were sewn with exquisite gold thread and embellished with diamonds. The weaving skills were centuries ahead of their time, according to textile experts who studied them. They discovered a weird black box, plastered in seals and warnings, and fashioned of an unidentified hard ebonite material inside a sealed chamber. Researchers decided it was safe to open after months of thorough examination and discussion. Instead of wealth, they discovered a set of extremely detailed blueprints depicting a system of water networks and underground tunnels beneath Jerusalem's Temple Mount, which were drawn on sturdy papyrus, a finding with enormous contemporary ramifications. The story is just getting started, and the tomb is open. What would be the one question you would like to ask King Solomon? Comment below. Please hit the like button and remember to subscribe.